Services Marketing, MKT625, Lecture number 15.
Assalamu alaikum khawateen wa hazrat. This is Wasim Ahsan, your instructor for the course Services Marketing MKT625 at the Virtual University of Pakistan. I welcome you to lecture number 15. We have been talking a lot about quality and satisfaction. The fact is that in addition to need and expectations, quality and satisfaction happen to be two more critical features of services marketing. It all starts with a need. Because a need is to be fulfilled in the marketplace, expectations develop on part of the customers because they have to fulfill their needs. And providers have to fulfill those from their point of view, and therefore they like to come up with a product which is of quality as expected by customers. So the relationship between need, expectation, and quality is evident. And then quality is something which is evaluated by customers. It is not something which is established by providers. Rather, customers look at so many different dimensions of the service product in order to make sure that the service product is of quality. The dimensions that I talked about in the previous lecture are reliability, responsiveness, assurance, empathy, and tangibles. All these put together form a nucleus which, if adhered to and followed very religiously, then the chances are providers will be able to satisfy their customers. So in other words, even if there is one single missing link, the whole exercise is going to end up as a negative episode. In order to make sure that the encounter of the customer with the provider is positive, the providers could have to fall on merit on all these dimensions. And then we have different themes which are very strategic in nature. And what happens is that providers have a way of relating the quality dimensions with those themes in order to trace the causes and reasons of satisfaction and dissatisfaction. You will recall that these themes of recovery, adaptability, spontaneity, and coping have been developed out of thousands of actual stories that took place in real life. Customers were contacted by research companies, and they came up with all those critical incidents which led to either satisfaction or dissatisfaction. And these four themes, in a very generalized manner, are the ones that encompass with all those stories. So therefore, the dimensions of quality which are evaluated by customers in order to make sure that the product is of quality have a very direct relationship with those themes. Because of the fact that providers like to go for a zero defect policy and strategy in order to produce quality, they have to understand the dimensions of quality, and they have to learn as to how to work within the four themes that I just mentioned. Because adherence to all these factors is something which will lead to customer satisfaction. And like I said, even if customers are not satisfied, these themes do enable you to look into the causes which led to that dissatisfaction so that you can make corrections. I would like to show you, with the help of a slide, the graphical presentation of the interface between these dimensions of quality and the four themes. As you can see from the slide, the quality dimensions form the core, and the four themes sit around the core. And this is how the interface works. Pretty simple to understand, and I also would like to explain all this with the help of examples, but in a moment. Let us start talking about the strategies with which providers can formulate within these four themes. We have fully understood what all these themes are all about. Now it is time to learn the kind of strategies that we can formulate in order to be very much in line with these themes so that we can fall on merit on the dimensions of quality. In the recovery mode, what providers have to understand is whenever something goes wrong, it has to be set right then and there. If it has gone wrong due to certain misbehavior or an unintentional lapse on part of the service provider, it can be corrected then and there. However, if it has happened due to malfunctioning of the system, then it has to be looked at a little more analytically. The system analysis have to be carried out, and as a matter of strategy, that has to be reported upwards. The frontline providers who are dealing with the customer and who are in a state of encounter, that have to report all that to their seniors in order to make sure that system is set right. If there is something wrong with the system design, corrections will be made accordingly. If there is something wrong with the process, again, something will be done and should be done accordingly. The essence of the whole exercise is that something that has gone wrong has to be set right so that a dissatisfied customer can be converted back into a satisfied customer. In the first place, our effort should be that a customer is not dissatisfied. And if we can do something then and there, then it is going to have a positive impact on the customer and we can recover the damage. So that is the strategic direction that we can take in order to recover from a situation which could have been a negative situation, and with the recovery we are on the path which will lead our customers into the zone of satisfaction. The second area of adaptability also demands that we become very strategic in this mode as well. Adaptability and flexibility, as you know, are things which, if exercised, they will satisfy our customers because we are willing to be flexible and adaptable to the situation as the customer finds himself or herself in. And if we think the flexibility can be exercised, there is no reason why we should not do that. However, flexibility and adaptability should not be exercised at the cost of the company's systems, or at the cost of profitability. I'm being a little too commercial, but the fact is that acceding to customers' demands at the cost of the systems and procedures may land us into trouble, and we have to take responsibility for that. But all I'm saying is that as a strategic measure, wherever we can, we should be flexible and adaptable in order to make our customers satisfied. And we have to develop a culture where the people think in terms of flexibility and adaptability. This certainly is a scenario where people have to create a balance between empowerment and the standardized procedures. They like to be flexible, but then they're constrained by the prescribed procedures which limit them to be within certain parameters. And therefore, that also make those providers a little demotivated who really want to walk an extra mile in order to satisfy their customers. But then the beauty lies in creating that balance that I just talked about. And in order to create that balance as a strategic move, middle and top managements have to be fully involved. As a matter of fact, these standardized procedures have to be prescribed in a way that some level of flexibility and adaptability is built into the system. Therefore, the frontline providers they may not have to refer back to their seniors in order to take decisions on small matters which they think they should be handling and managing by themselves. The third theme or the mode is that of spontaneity. Now, we again have to look at what kind of strategies we can come up with. Don't forget for a moment that all these modes are very strategic in nature, and it is a matter of strategy that we are following certain path to make sure that our customers remain satisfied. In the mode of spontaneity, what we can do as a provider company is create a culture which really develops people who can be spontaneous in a very positive manner. And it goes without saying that negative spontaneity is not something that we must talk as a matter of strategy. As a matter of strategy, we have to talk about positive spontaneity, and therefore a culture which is characterized by empowerment, by quick feedback, and by training. The meaning trained people is the one which really breeds spontaneity. We have to have the training programs, the meaning an effective internal and interactive marketing, so that people can develop skills of being spontaneous. And spontaneity is something which is not warranted. It is not solicited. It is something which you volunteer, and is something which customer does not demand at all. It's only that you, at the spur of the moment, do something in such a positive manner that it leaves a lasting impact on the customer, who likes to come back to you and buy that service from you again. And thereby, he becomes a loyal customer. And loyal customer is the one that we really look for. The fourth mode is that of coping. And for coping, again, we have to have certain strategic formulations that help us manage problem customers. And as a matter of strategy, what companies must do is, again, develop a culture whereby we can develop those skills among our colleagues and staff members who really can handle problem customers. And what we have to remember about this mode is, as a matter of strategy and policy, that we must not have dissatisfied customers only because one of the customers is creating problems. And therefore, coping is something which allows us to let go of one bad customer in order to keep the remaining lot to ourselves. After having talked about the dimensions of quality which customers like to evaluate in order to make sure that they are buying a quality service, and the four themes which have to be looked at in a very strategic mode, we are now all set to talk about all this with the help of one example. And let me give you this example, which is going to talk about the 5 dimensions of quality evaluation in a composite way. Let me give you one example from the textbook, a very convincing example that spreads across the 5 dimensions of quality. It relates a car repair situation in which a customer goes to a motor garage for having his car repaired. If the problem is fixed the very first time and the service is delivered as promised, meaning within the time frame which was indicated, then the customer is going to look at the service as reliable. So this is a scenario where reliability really presents itself very convincingly. The other dimension of responsiveness is evaluated by a customer in terms of procedures. The customer finds that there are no complicated procedures through which he has to go in order to have his car registered, and there is no the waiting time, and people are very responsive to the special requests which the customer makes. And every customer has his own requests to make, and this is something which we are going to look into within this lecture as to why different customers are going to look at the same service in a different way, and what really is it that providers can do in order to be more responsive. Anyway, back to the dimension of responsiveness, the customer finds that the company also happens to be very responsive. The third dimension of assurance really exhibits itself, again very convincingly, by way of people showing their competence about mechanical expertise. The customer finds that mechanics are fully trained and they're very competent people, and the total workforce happens to be a very well-trained workforce. So automatically the customer gets assured that he's in safe hands and the service which is being rendered is going to be a quality service. Do not forget the fact that this is a situation which is very rich on credence, and you will recall that the credence quality of service is the one in which the customer cannot really evaluate the service even after it is rendered, and the customer takes quite a bit of time before he can make up his mind that the service rendered was of quality, because the results of the service are not really evident immediately after the service is bought. But there is a way for providers to assure their customers that they're in safe hands so that their comfort level is elevated and confidence and trust are instilled into the customer about the competence level of the service providers. So back to this example, the customer finds these people very assuring because of the technical expertise they have and the command they have over all the technical procedures. The customer also finds the workforce in the motor garage very empathetic because they address the customer by his last name. They remember his name from the previous services, and as a matter of fact, they are fully conversant with the strengths and weaknesses of the engine of that particular customer because they remember the previous services. And in the light of that, they are giving a very personalized kind of a service to the customer who feels very important and looks upon the workforce as being very empathetic toward the customer. So again, on this very dimension, the customer rates the company as competent on merit. The fifth dimension of quality, which is about tangibles, again, is very convincing as far as the motor garage is concerned. The customer finds the equipment very up-to-date and state-of-the-art, and even the workforce wears very neat and clean uniforms, and there is an air of standardization all around the motor garage. So these 5 dimensions on which the customer could have evaluated the company have turned out to be very positive, and the customer has rated this the service as positive, and therefore drives out of the motor garage as a satisfied customer. So this is one composite example of the one particular service which can be evaluated on 5 different dimensions. The fact is that you people can look at so many different services in this very context, meaning you can evaluate, for example, an airline, a courier service, a fast food service on these 5 dimensions. And just to give you, the one hint about the airline, I think the reliability dimension in the case of airline is going to be the ability of the airline to keep its schedules, meaning the departure time and the arrival time, and so on and so forth. The one example about the tangibles could be, the quality of the fleet which the airline has. I would not talk about the remaining dimensions and leave those to your imagination. You should be filling up the gaps as to what is it that the customer should evaluate when the customer is assessing the quality of the airline in terms of these 5 dimensions. Now, having known the 5 dimensions very well, let us also summarize in a very strategic way what should be the kind of thinking, or what should be rather the behavior on part of the provider while the provider is going through 4 different themes, because there is a very, very strong interface between the dimensions I've just talked about and the themes which providers must follow in order to make sure that their customers remain satisfied. And even if they smell dissatisfaction on part of the customer, they should be able to come up with some kind of recovery to make sure that the customer remains satisfied. These strategies of the recovery, adaptability, spontaneity, and coping could be summarized in the following way. When it comes to recovery, I think the providers in the first place could have to acknowledge the problem, because we are in a strategic mode where something has gone wrong. And something has gone wrong either because of the behavior of the provider, intentional or unintentional, or because of some erroneous system process. And therefore, we have to acknowledge that the problem has occurred. We must apologize to the customer about the problem, and we must not be defensive, because the moment we become defensive, we have lost the point. And the fact is that it's going to add to the negative episode of the customer, and he's going to walk out of the facility as a dissatisfied customer. Another thing that we must do is that we apologize to the customer for the inconvenience caused. That is a very important strategic step that we must take while we are trying to recover the service from a certain possible damage. We also must report the system flaws to our superiors, and that requires upward communication so that an appropriate action can be taken. The other mode of adaptability again demands that we recognize the seriousness of the need. Here we find ourselves in a situation where we certainly have the ability to fulfill the need. It only is the extra demand on part of the customer which we want to accede to, and we have to take time to be sure that we really can do that. And the fact is that we should be flexible and should look at the ways and means whereby we can accommodate our customer. We must adjust the system if we really can, and that is why I said that it is the job of the top management to come up with systems and procedures which have a certain level of flexibility that provides empowerment to the frontline providers who can be flexible enough to make adjustments within the system. And then, that is not all. The provider must explain all that to the customer so that he can convince the customer that he has walked an extra mile in order to satisfy that customer. When the customer realizes that, he is going to admire the service. And because of that admiration, the customer is going to become a repeat customer, and he might become a loyal customer. And again, that is not all. When you make adjustment and you show flexibility and adaptability, you must take responsibility for the action that you have taken. You have taken a very strategic action, and you are the one, as the provider, who is going to be held responsible for that. And the fact is, if you have taken a positive action, you should be rewarded for that. And the company should have a system in place which automatically recognizes the positive adaptability and flexibility of the employees in order to come up with certain kind of reward and to differentiate the star performers from those who are not star performers. Coming to spontaneity, a few points that we have to remember in order to be a good, positive service provider is that we should take time in order to take a decision about being spontaneous. Because this, again, is something which is not really demanded by the customer. We have to be sure that the action that we take is going to end up in pleasantries, and that is going to add to the positive episodes of the customer, thereby turning him into a loyal customer. We must be very attentive, and we must take time in order to come up with the rightmost step which will please the customer and which will elate his emotions. We must do something extra. This is the essence of the strategy of spontaneity. And then we come to coping. The points that we have to remember are that we must listen in the first place, and we must try to accommodate the customer. We must convince the customer that he is on the wrong path, and due to certain misunderstanding, maybe he is a little uncomfortable, but that is not the way the service is all about. He is creating inconvenience for other customers, not only the company, but other customers, and therefore his negative behavior is not going to be tolerated at the cost of losing other customers. So the essence of the strategy is that if the customer, meaning the negative customer, does not listen to the provider, then the provider should let go of that customer, because the provider would like to keep the remaining customers who are good customers, and they must not be disturbed by somebody who is creating a problem for the company and other customers. Having talked about the elements of quality evaluation, which form the core of the whole evaluation process, and the 4 themes, I would now like to show you, with the help of a graphical presentation, the summarized form of all that I've talked about, because all this has strategic bearings and strategic implications, not just the strategies that I've talked about a few more generalized kind of strategies which take place within the company in a macro form. As you can look at the slide, elements happen to be at the core, and what you see as the next stage is the themes, the 4 themes that I talked about, and we have educated ourselves very convincingly, I think, about those themes. And after that, we have the strategic actions, and these strategic actions are those strategic modes that I talked about in relation to the 4 themes. What is it that we should be doing to recover the situation, and what is it that we should be doing in order to be adaptable, and then being spontaneous, and then having the ability to cope with difficult customers. The 4th stage is the one which entails overall bigger macro strategies. And you will agree with me that the strategies that are about planning recovery, facilitating adaptability, encouraging spontaneity, and coping with problem employees are the ones which really get translated into the overall strategies of training, reward systems, internal process improvements, and a change in organizational structure. How? Well, it is obvious that when you are in the recovery mode and something has gone wrong with the system and some changes are made to the system design, and hence with the implementation process, you need to train your people about the changes that have been brought about. You need to throw light on all those angles which are very important strategically in order to bring about satisfaction on part of the customers, and therefore training strategies. And that takes us back to the importance of, again, internal and interactive marketing. These strategies of 4 themes also going to have an impact on the reward systems that I just talked about in relation to being adaptable and flexible. Well, the star performers have to be rewarded, and if people are so positive that they can make adjustments within the established systems to the satisfaction of their customers so that they remain loyal to the company, they have to be rewarded. And therefore, the company at the macro level have to come up with certain strategies of rewards, because differentiation between star performers and others has to be put in place. That keeps employees motivated, and motivated employees are the ones that keep the company from derailment, and they are the ones that help the company achieve its mission and follow the vision as established. Internal process improvement, again, is something which is very closely related with the recovery strategies. And recovery strategies could happen to be among the most important strategies that any company might make in order to keep its customers satisfied, or rather, in order to keep its customers having even a minor feeling of dissatisfaction. So when you are planning recovery, you have to think about the internal process improvement if that is warranted. And I would again rub in the point, if recovery is going to be staged then and there only because of an unintentional mistake on part of the provider, then there is nothing as internal process improvement. It only is a correction of behavior on part of the provider. However, if it warrants some kind of improvement to the system, then it certainly has strategic implications, and the company has to come up with a strategic formulation that takes care of that change within the process. All these overall strategies that I've talked so far, meaning about training, reward systems, and process improvement, certainly, again, have a bearing on the organizational structure. The structure is all about the purpose, and it is all about the nature of service, and it is all about the objectives. And whenever there's a change in objectives and goals, it goes without saying that structure gets changed. It is a huge strategic moment the way companies have to bring about change in their structures, because it is a question of hiring more people or training people and dealing with the strategies of investments, because you have to develop training programs, you have to develop people, and you have to think in terms of the promotions, and like I said, you have to induct more people. You have to overall revamp and improve the organization in a way that you end up developing a culture which is friendly toward the customer and keeps your customers satisfied. I have talked about all this in a simplified manner, but when we talk about these strategies all along the course, you will realize that there's a lot more to what I've talked about, and therefore I would leave the details to as and when we talk about these concepts along the course. Now, with learning of quality and satisfaction, our understanding of the critical variables of marketing mix is complete. You'll be amazed to know that these are the basic principal concepts that we needed to understand in order to be good at services marketing. We started with identification of a need which has to be fulfilled by providers, and we learned by way of understanding the characteristics of services, and also by way of understanding the experiential side of services, meaning services being rich on experience and not on search qualities. And especially when it comes to credence, it makes services even more complicated in terms of their evaluation. So back to need identification, starting from need identification and ending at the quality and the satisfaction side of the total marketing services spectrum, what we have done is we have completed our understanding of the basic variables that we needed to understand. Now, is that to say that the course is complete? No, it's not. I mean, there's much more to it. All I'm saying is that the basic variables are going to be the building blocks for further insight into the same concepts that we have learned so far. As a matter of fact, it takes us back to the theory of a gap that exists between what is offered to customers and what they expect, which is now going to be the basis of our understanding throughout the course. And I will explain step by step how. But the fact remains that we started with the identification of a need in the light of characteristics of services, and we understood, what a tangibility spectrum is, so that we could appreciate the experiential side of services, and that took us on to the area of the classification of services, which I would like to show you with the help of the same slide that I showed you in one of my previous lectures. And you can see from here that after the classification of services, which is all about the nature of service and the organization structure, level of demand, and so on and so forth, you are very well acquainted with, we went on to the development of our understanding about variables of marketing mix for services marketing. And we fully understood why there is a need for additions and adaptations when it comes to variables of services marketing. And we know very well that there are 7 P's and not 4 P's that we need to mix while dealing with our strategic formulations for services. And it was the understanding of the marketing mix of services that led us to develop an understanding of the gap model. And gap model, you see, is the one which is now going to be the basis of our understanding for the rest of the course. This is extremely important, and we should be talking lecture by lecture as to how to fill different gaps that I talked about in that particular lecture. And after developing our understanding about the gap theory, we went on to understanding the behavior of consumer in terms of evaluation process and in terms of levels of expectations, because consumers have different levels of expectations in response to different situations, and therefore we've got to understand in thorough details as to what are the expectations and how those expectations get changed over time, and what is it that we strategically can do to deal with all that. Our understanding for the time being is limited to the strategic moves, but now we have to start talking in great details as to what are the angles and dimensions that really help us to understand why different features of services are preferred and why certain features are disliked by customers, and why is it that a competitive product stands out in comparison with ours, and why is it that we have not been in a position to fulfill the requirement of the customer despite the fact that we have been very well intentioned and we allocated our resources toward solution of the problem, and yet the results that we get are not really optimal. Anyway, after developing the understanding about the two models of behavior on part of the customer, meaning the process of evaluation and the levels of expectations, we went on to develop our understanding about quality and satisfaction. And that is where I have ended today during this lecture by saying that we have developed understanding of the principal variables that we need to understand in order to go into details of all that we have learned so far. So in other words, the concepts that I'm going to talk about from now on are not going to be totally new to you. I mean, they are going to be things like market research, its importance, and the other variables of the marketing that I've not talked so far in detail, of course. And those are the things which you have educated yourselves about in the marketing course for tangible goods. But it is only that we have to talk about all that again within the spectrum of expectations, because of the nature of services, the variability, and the heterogeneous nature of the providers. We have to see to it that even subtle changes between expectations and about expectations are really understood and appreciated by the providers. And therefore, we are going to go back to the gap theory, and I'm going to start talking about those details. To start with, the gap one of the level of expectations. And you will recall that gap one is all about companies' inability to fully understand what really is it that the customer wants. People like to, providers like to think that they have understood expectations of the customers, but the fact is they do not. They emphasize more on what should be the expectations instead of what it really is that they do want. So the emphasis should be on do. As experts say, thinking of many service providers when it comes to closing this first gap is very inside out, meaning they think about what really appeals to the company first and then try to apply that to the expectations of the customer. And that is a wrong approach. Experts contend that the thinking should be outside in. In other words, you have to think about the whole thing from the perspective of the customer. And we can do that only with the help of marketing research. So in other words, just thinking about what should be expected by the customer is erroneous thinking on part of the providers. It must be what is it that is expected and required by the customers. So the fulfillment response on part of the providers has got to be very structured, and we can achieve that only with the help of research. How? I'm going to talk about that in a few moments and more in detail in the next lecture. But let me get back to the variables that we've learned so far. Actually, starting with the need identification and ending at the quality and satisfaction, we can say, well, we have done the job because we identified the right need, we developed a product, and we came up to the expectations of the customer, and it is because of that that he is satisfied. And naturally, we produce quality, that is why he's satisfied, and he's a loyal customer. So it looks like, the interplay of all these variables is kind of the ultimate defining character of services marketing, but it is not. We have to go into much more detailed probing. And that probing, like I said, can be done only with the help of marketing research, because there are so many different dimensions and features that customers evaluate and they look at. And while I was talking about quality and satisfaction, I think the whole thing became very clear that it requires a lot more understanding in a well-structured way in order to arrive at the right decisions that will allow us to move in the right strategic direction. What happens is, while we try to fill up gap number one, or let's put it this way, while we deal with gap number one, it occurs basically due to the fact that providers are not really close to their customers. This is what marketing experts contend. They think that providers do not maintain the kind of direct interaction with the customers the way they should. They do not get into the kind of marketing research which they should. And because of this distance between the providers and the customers, this gap occurs. And it is because of this gap that resource allocation is misguided. And it is because of that results are not really optimal, like I pointed out a few moments ago. And it is because of that that you see the derailment from the actual mission of the company. And it is because of that that marketing services providers throw themselves into a sense of bewilderment as to what has happened, because they thought they were fulfilling the expectations of the customers, whereas the results speak to the contrary. What is it that these providers can do in order to fill up the gap? Well, marketing research is the answer, but what they generally do before research could be undertaken is the following, and let me talk about that briefly. Marketing people generally think that by getting into the theory of segmentation or the area of segmentation, they really can pinpoint the expectations, because what they're doing is they are identifying a need group and a group of people or prospects who are very much alike in terms of their thinking and in terms of their expectations. And they also have very similar demographic and psychographic profiles. And once they've done that, there is no way they could go wrong in terms of identifying the right needs and hence the right expectations. But that is not the case. Why? The answer lies in the heterogeneous nature of the service delivery and even the service providers. The fact remains that so many different people within the same need group want services delivered in so many different ways that there is a tremendous need on part of the service providers to look at segmentation with a fresher angle. And the angle that they look at segmentation is that of mass customization. And to give you one example, within the same group, 10 different people launching wedding events would like to have 10 different kinds of flower arrangements. And if you happen to be in the business of flower arrangement, you've got to customize all those needs and requirements. So just look at the features which different people look at while buying the same product. This may not be the case for tangible goods, which have identical packaging and identical shape and form. So the options that are available to you are, number one, you tell your customers, well, take it as is. And if you exercise this option, I think the chances are you're not really establishing for yourself a very bright future. The second option is that you customize their needs. And if you customize, you again are putting yourself into a challenging situation. I'm not saying that as service providers, you cannot manage that. As a matter of fact, you can manage that. And if you manage that successfully, it also takes you into the area of beautiful pricing, because you can charge premium pricing for those arrangements which you think are more creative. So look at the challenges that the services marketing offers to service providers and service managers, even when they have identified the right need group and the right segment. Mass customization seems to be the answer, and that is the fresher angle from which service providers are looking at fulfillment of needs, expectations, quality, satisfaction, and so on and so forth. But again, this is not to say that they really are in a position to exactly pinpoint the level of expectation? The answer still lies in marketing research, and I will tell you how and why, but a little later. The second strategic option which generally the service providers resort to is relationship marketing, because they think when they develop positive relations with their customers, meaning existing customers, they become close to their customers. And I started with the contention on part of the experts that the gap number one, which is between expectations and thinking of the management, occurs because management keeps a distance from the customers, seems to have its answer in relationship marketing. And that is why these providers think if they develop positive relations with their existing customers, they are in a position to be close to them, and thereby they can really pinpoint the needs or the changing expectations and desires on their part, and hence come up with strategies which really are compatible with those changing needs and expectations. But that, again, may not be the case because customers are looking to so many different features, like I told you. And in order to be able to look very incisively and analytically into all the features of the products, the value perceptions of the customers, it is important that the marketing research is carried out. The relationship marketing is something which does help service providers to some extent in order to predict the level of expectation on part of the customers, but that is not where the exact answer lies. However, it also is not to say that relationship marketing is something negative. It is extremely positive, and it does add to the value, no question about that. But I'm only talking about the limitations that it may offer you as service providers. The other side of the marketing is transactional marketing, which is all about closing the commercial side of the deals and winning over new customers. Because at the end of every transaction, what has happened is you have added one new customer, in case the customer does not happen to be a repeat purchaser. When that happens and the customer is satisfied, then you have to manage the post-purchase behavior, which you will recall. And the post-purchase period is the one which really establishes the future behavior on part of the customer. So in order to make sure that the future direction that the customer takes is that of satisfaction and coming back to the fold of the loyal customers, you've got to be very critical of the service that you have rendered, and you've got to be very analytical of what you have done in order to see that the promise that you delivered is exactly according to the expectations. And again, the need for marketing research. But the relationship between transaction marketing and relationship marketing is very important that you have to understand. And that is a relationship with which marketing providers generally think is very helpful for them in order to keep the customers and in order to pinpoint their expectations. I'm still talking about those strategies or those strategic options with which service providers think they have to themselves before they get into marketing research. In order to show you the importance of this option of relationship between relationship marketing and transactional marketing, let me take you to a slide which very graphically explains what I have talked about. As you can see from this slide, it all starts with quality and satisfaction. You as service provider have delivered quality and your customers are satisfied customers, which is the ultimate test of the features of a product. How you develop those features is a matter which we shall be discussing later in relation to marketing research. I am rubbing that point in over and over again, but just assume for the moment that you have delivered quality and you have satisfied customers. And if the customers are not satisfied, you can see on the right-hand side of the decision node that those customers are going to desert you and they will switch over supplier. and go to a competitor. And that is not an optimal situation because you've got to do something about it. Getting back to the decision node, if the answer is yes, customer is satisfied, then you're going to retain that customer. If you have been able to retain a customer, that is a loyal customer because this customer is going to go into a repeat cycle of purchases. This is the customer who's going to stick with the company. This is the customer who's going to bring you more business, and this is the customer who's going to spend more with the company. And that's the beauty of retention. And you know very well that retaining customers is always less expensive. Now, according to the theory of relationship marketing, what is happening is that you are exercising the essence of that marketing directed toward those customers who you have retained. And as a result of that, what is happening is these customers are spreading positive word of mouth. And as you can see from the box underneath retention, which says referrals, they give positive referrals. And positive referrals are the ones which bring in more customers. When you have new customers, meaning more customers, again, you have to see to it that you deliver quality and there are no lapses in the delivery mechanism. There is no need for recovery and so on and so forth, and you end up having satisfied customers. Now, these new customers, again, are going to put themselves in a decision mode, and they're going to ask themselves whether they are satisfied or not. If they are satisfied, they're going to go back to the pool of those customers who you already have retained. So they go back into the green area, and again, relationship marketing works its wonders there, and the pool gets bigger and bigger. Now, getting back to referrals and new customers, you can see there that transactional marketing is playing its role. Now, transactional marketing is playing its role only to the extent of closing a commercial deal. It is not all that simple. What is happening is that you have gone through the encounter and you have delivered the product which is of good quality, and because of that quality, the customer has satisfied himself and gone back to the pool of your retained customers. However, if the new customer is not satisfied due to any given reasons, he goes into the fold of those customers who will go to somebody else because of a negative word of mouth and because of negative referrals. And this is where you have to bring into practice the strategy of recovery. And this is where recovery is going to work. It is not to say that recovery strategies are 100% solutions for your problems and win over all those who are not satisfied. It is upon you to see, again, through the marketing research, what is it that did not satisfy these customers. You go back to the elements of quality that you evaluated from the customer's perspective and relate those with the themes that I talked about in the beginning of the lecture, and you end up with a certain conclusion that pinpoints for you the cause of that dissatisfaction. When you run that trace on that particular cause and reasons, you are in a position to ascertain the exact cause and in a position to come up with the right research design which will give you the right results without any bias, hopefully, to correct the situation. So by having shown you the connection between relationship marketing and transactional marketing, we also have seen for ourselves the importance of the recovery strategies, because the intention on part of every provider should be to convert dissatisfied customers into satisfied customers. Not only that, those who are not fully satisfied, do satisfy them, and those who are satisfied, bring them into the fold of loyal customers. And you will recall the example that I gave you of the marketing research which was carried out by one of the multinationals in the United States that showed the company, those customers who rated the company as number 4, where 5 was the highest score, and even those who scored the company as 4 were not really motivated to come back to the company as repeat purchasers. So you've got to think about all those things in order to make sure that your customers remain satisfied, and you can pinpoint the causes of that satisfaction, and if they're not satisfied, again the causes of that dissatisfaction. Now with this, I would like to call it a day, and in the next lecture I would like to talk about the objectives that any service provider should have in place before the service provider embarks on a program of marketing research. And experts say that every service provider should have a program of marketing research, not just one episodic research in isolation the once in a while, because the one set of market research study gives you just one snapshot view of one particular moment in time. It does not really give you an analysis of situations as they develop from time to time. So that is for the next lecture. Thank you very much for your attendance, and I look forward to talking with you in the next lecture. Allah Hafiz.